This is Solo Travel Talk. Your solo travel advisor is Astrid Clements.
Here on Solo Travel Talk, we often discuss in terms of the experience, not just going somewhere, but the impact travel has on our lives. Today, we get to hear from Gerri Hobdy, an experienced traveler who has a unique perspective and an appreciation of how travel can change our lives. Welcome to Solo Travel Talk.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to our little talk today.
I know. I'm so excited to hear about your perspective and some of the experiences that you've had.
Oh, great. Oh, great.
Just why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Tell everybody a little bit about you.
I am a mother, and I've been in Baton Rouge for about 33 years. I worked in community outreach with the Louisiana Division of the Arts, and then I was the Assistant Secretary of the Office of Cultural Development and State Historic Preservation Officer for 10 years. So that gave me the opportunity to examine the archaeology, the preservation, what's important about this state to tourists and to people who live here and create that fabric. Then I worked in philanthropy for 10 years, director of grant making, did a lot of disaster grant making with the Baton Rouge Area Foundation. And then I moved over to the Baton Rouge Community College to work in the Office of Institutional Advancement, doing community outreach.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, and I always think of our area here in South Louisiana, especially Baton Rouge, being so distinct. So it sounds like all of your career, your work experiences put you really directly in contact with all those unique aspects.
Definitely. And I think it was interesting when I worked with the state, we worked very closely with the Office of Tourism. And one of the things that we did while I was there was we created the African American Trail for the state. And along with that and working with the National Register and also having an objective kind of viewpoint, because I'm not from here, I'm a Yankee. I'm from Ohio, but went to school as an undergrad in New Orleans and grad school and decided to stay. I had a different kind of appreciation, and people here sometimes don't understand how important placemaking is, and they live the culture. And to be in a place where people don't put on, it's not Disney. People live this culture. You can go places and people still speak French or hunt for their food or fish for their food every day, or just live those local traditions out. Even going to Rain, where you have the frog princess and all that, and they take it so seriously. And then once you get into that culture, you begin to appreciate it just like they do. And there's so many experiences like that I've had, especially with Louisiana Main Streets, which was a program we were able to institutionalize during my tenure. And every single community says something different and beautiful about and I have to say that I used to be going, when I'd have to go and visit some of the main streets, I was, I'm leaving my babies at home. I'm going on this road by myself. I wasn't quite at the rank where I got a driver, right? So I'm going, and then I get there and it was like walking into a box of chocolates, because they were just jewels, and every person was interested and excited, and I wouldn't want to leave.
Yeah, wow.
But there's so many communities around the state like that just offer visitors and tourists and residents so much to learn. Because I did a lot of business travel outside of the state and that kind of thing, it gave me a pretty good perspective on travel and gave me the opportunity to travel quite a bit.
You used a word, placemaking, that I've never heard before. And it says so much, but I almost want you to tell me a little bit more about what it means.
Well, with creative placemaking, you look around you and you, and there are things that we take for granted that we do. I believe their cultural anthropologists, our state anthropologist, Maida Owens, who actually lived up the street from
you,
has commissioned a number of studies to identify what makes us us. Is it the food? Is it the way we do things? What are our traditions that are unique in most cases to this area, or that we do really well, but when you look at this place, it speaks through these traditions. you're able to identify a place and also integrate in the place and celebrate those things that are unique to that area. And it creates common ground too for the people who live there and binds them together in those traditions.
I think it's interesting though, because I wonder, and we've had this discussion on Solo Travel Talk before, where it's almost like you have to be outside of your culture, the same way that you were describing coming in, not being originally from here. It's like you're able to see things in a different way because you're not from here. And there's something about people almost not being able to read what their culture is because
they live it.
They're living it. Yeah, they're
right.
in it.
And can often take it for granted.
Yeah.
You know, but for someone to come in, I remember. I went to Interlochen when I was in middle school, in Traverse City, Michigan, and there were so many little things about that place that I remember, and they were all about cultural placemaking. Of course, the school itself, the arts institution, but beyond that, the Petoskey stone, and it was a certain kind of rock that was just unique to that area, the fudge and the ice cream, and certain artists who created prints that were so identified with that area that other artists came there to train in those particular techniques. And those things stick with me. I might not remember all the people I met, but I remember those traditions, those smells, those tastes. And it's a very important part of my emotional and vocabulary,
Yeah.
you know.
Now tell me, when you get to travel, how do you experience another culture? Tell us some of the ways that you really get into that experiencing somewhere else.
If I look at that, one thing that I do in almost any city that I go to is I experience the museums. Just how people collect their local artifacts or what they value and what they determine is important to curate. I like going to the smaller, especially if you're in a smaller town, some of the smaller kinds of museums that are very local, and you get to learn a lot. You can sort of wander around, but then going to the great museums of a city can tell you a lot about cultural placemaking, what's important, but also just expose you to how big their common ground is, how connected they feel that place is to the rest of the world, and then you can determine how you fit in there and what you get out of being in that space. I grew up in outside of Cleveland, so I used to ride my bike because it was free to the Cleveland Museum of Art, and fell in love because I had an exceptional Miss Higginbotham art teacher. So I was introduced to the fine arts very early. We had arts in our schools and music classes, and going to the museum and being introduced and understanding artist motivation and technique in second and third grade allowed me to, as I grew up, look deeper into the meaning behind different museums and how they put exhibits together. And I was able to reflect on what they meant to me, and it helped me integrate into the cultural landscapes of cities that I visited. The other way I would say is I've had the opportunity, a fabulous opportunity, to visit South Africa, and visited a number of the townships and got to do some hands-on work and do some volunteer work as well with some pretty fabulous nonprofit organizations. And when you go and you get to spend time with people, and occasionally sometimes people who are or have been in distress, you can understand where a country puts their values and how they care for their people. I mean, how you care for those living things around you, whether it's animals, people, whatever it is, kind of gives you an indication of the humanity of the people in that area. So being able to tell stories to groups of kids and then have them tell me stories, which was mind-boggling. I was like, doing storytelling in Johannesburg and braiding hair. It was just wonderful and so fulfilling. And there, I also had the opportunity to visit some of the Apartheid Museum, to visit Lilliesworth, and of course Robben Island, some other places that totally moved me. And being a person of color, and looking at the issue of apartheid and what that meant to that color, because I lived through that era, kind of on this side, was very important to me in shaping my views of America and what it can do and can be. And I was very proud of my country, by the way, and how we ultimately chose to participate with the liberation. And a matter of fact, had occasion to celebrate with some universities here the Day of the African Child, which commemorates the children of Soweto who were very instrumental in moving the apartheid movement forward. Many of them were killed. And to go to that place and to see those spaces and to meet family members who were there and remembered, oh my, it was just something. But experiencing a city through the eyes of the people who live there, especially when they're historic experiences that transfer here, was especially and emotionally rewarding.
That's amazing. That sounds like an amazing experience. And what I can tell is that you've really reflected a lot on that. And I'm wondering, did you have sort of a progressing understanding of that experience?
Yeah, and even preparing for come on and have a talk.
Our
I said,
talk today,
let me, I'm older. I gotta, dust things off a little bit in my mind. But going through it at the time, of course, there were things that were happening, and I had the opportunity to reflect on. But as I get away from that trip, one of the things that I have grown to understand is the courage of a people, and what children who believed in something so strongly that they were willing to die for it. Oh my God. To understand that as an adult, where we may have never made those kinds of choices, that there may be times when that is important, that you believe in something enough that you will make the ultimate sacrifice, like soldiers, our veterans, our police, people saving communities, people seeking to fight for equity in this country, but courage, having the courage to change, to do a little bit more than pray, but to have the courage to really affect change. And I think traveling to that space in particular helps embolden me, affirms me, and gives me some hope that things can change for the better.
In hearing that story, I'm just thinking that I cannot think of a more powerful example of travel really changing your life for the better.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that we had talked about was the importance of travel, especially solo travel.
Yes.
Which I will admit, I was traveling for work, with groups, with other people all the time. And I remember Astrid and I had lunch one day, and she was talking about, I believe she went to China, but she was sharing with me something that happened with her while she was there. She met someone who practiced natural medicine, who could look in your eyes and just tell from the health of your eyes
what's going on,
what you needed, how you were imbalanced, and then offer recommendations on how to balance that. And I was like, wow, we had, faith healers, and I had a faith healer in my family, but I never saw it from that perspective. But she was telling me all this, and then she was like, oh, and I went by myself, and I'm like, yourself? and I was like, the first thing that went in my mind, oh, traveling by yourself is so dangerous. And then because when we were in college, we would go in Cleveland, we would go to Columbus. That was a trip, or college or whatever. Or, when I was here, we'd go to Lafayette for some festival or something like that. But my children, they go to Europe. They're traveling all over the world. Like, what? And I said, well, if they can do it, I can do it. But I don't want to go that far. But I felt for rather than explore other cultures, that wasn't where I was and what I needed. I needed to engage in self-care. And that was one of the things that Astrid, just start small and, get where you're comfortable, go where you're comfortable, or put yourself in a different space, but don't push until you're ready, right? And even though I've done London, Paris, and South Africa, Canada, and some other places, I said, well, let me do a trip here. And I have some very dear friends, and Conley, who said, you need to get away. They knew it was way past time for a vacation.
There was like an intervention.
It was absolutely an intervention. And don't take anyone with you. And I'm like, don't take my dogs, don't take my daughter, don't take a son, don't take a friend. What? How does one do that? But I did it. And I didn't go far. I went to Miami. I stayed at a Lowe's. And it was really interesting because, that's like up the block, right? But I wasn't going to do anything except me. And I realized when I got there that I never really done that before, ever. And I was in my 50s. Never. It was always going and planning. And that was the other thing, over planning and planning for a bunch of other people, for my kids, my family. And this was like, this was just me. I had no agenda other than where I was going to stay and for how long. And that was it. So I learned how to live with myself. I was kind of losing my voice and passion, dreams, and that kind of thing. You just start to get into a survival mode sometimes when you get older and the pressures of your children's life and all that kind of stuff. And I'd lost my laughter. I wasn't smiling like I used to. I wasn't laughing and I didn't know what to laugh at. I didn't know what I enjoyed. I needed to find my voice and just to be not just in a reflective space, but also in a space where I could shut off, and this is really hard for me, the internet and digital everything, and, unleash that gadget that is attached to my hand and just be totally present. I ate, I had occasion to eat at some fine restaurants, but to sit down and have a meal without having to entertain anybody else, with a great glass of wine, a beautifully presented meal, or meals in this case, because I ate a lot of them, by myself, and to savor each bite and to really be interested in the chef, not because, bring the chef out, but because I wanted to thank them for this wonderful experience. And I could tell that the food in front of me was made out of love because the petals are here and this drink has cotton candy in it or whatever it was. Yeah, I did have a dessert with cotton candy. It was kind of bizarre, but beautiful, and really appreciate it. And once you can stop and slow down and appreciate that flower that's right there on that table just for you, and all the mixtures of different flavors that you may have never tasted, and that cognac that is just exquisite, then you can sort of start centering back again into yourself. Finding that voice, and then not being responsible for anybody else's happiness except mine, was real important. And then I began to wander. Of course, I spent some time in the spa, for self-care and that kind of stuff. But and going in the ocean and sort of letting things just wash through me and wash off. But the best part of it was just wandering with no agenda. I didn't care if I got lost. I just didn't worry about my safety. I wasn't stupid, but wandering through the day, just walking into whatever I was pulled to, whether it was a tourist trap or a jewelry store or makeup store, tattoo shop. And I met some amazing tattoo artists who happened to be on one of those tattoo shows where they fix bad tattoos and that kind of thing. I didn't get one. Not that trip. But
I'll just cross that question.
Yeah, right. Didn't get a tattoo. Yeah, that's right. But I remember going down the street and I said, oh, there's these great restaurants, but I noticed over a few days that the locals were going into this little hole in the wall. And I said, that's where I want to go eat. And I struck up some of the best conversations with people who lived and worked right in that area. And so I hung out in that place, had a few drinks, and then I went down the street and they were having this vape conference. Yeah, a vape conference. But they were the coolest because it was like an international conference that they were having. And I just started talking to people and they were inviting me to parties and I was just going to, and it was great. And the people, and it just gave me such a great, and I didn't feel like I had to attach to people or prove or do anything for. They didn't have to do anything except to be kind. And just to be kind and civil. And just being in a space where all that negative energy was just not there, just to be civil with people, that fed my spirit. But certainly having some time to reflect as well and to write and just to do some free writing. But after having an experience where I went away, no expectations of anything, helped me find my voice again. And I could only have done it by myself, being with myself, because we can, be busy doing nothing and fill that self space with it because we don't feel we deserve it, perhaps, or we don't want to be a martyr, but no, it's better to give than to receive, and just taking that time and finding a voice through travel was something I was able to experience, and very thankful for friends who encouraged that.
I'm thinking of the person who's hearing that, and this could be me as included, who's hearing this and is thinking, that sounds fantastic. But I think this might be like almost a technical question is, what do you think, besides being alone, created the environment where those revelations and this voice discovery could happen? Do you think it was just a matter of being alone, or what other things did you think contributed to that?
I like that question because as soon as you said it, I started thinking of those things. Definitely experiencing wonderful food, smells, the kind of it. And I love, looking at Astrid's pictures. And I do this, because I travel vicariously through her.
Me too.
But I'm looking for those exquisite, beautiful things. And not necessarily even expensive, but beauty in the natural environment, in the created environment, in the architecture, in the design of the room, the pillows, the sheets, how in a hotel room, the soaps and all of that are displayed, what kind of stuff they put in there, the smells. I think that's important too. The kind of water that's available to cleanse you, whether it's in a bath or a shower head, a shower or a beach or steam. I think being around good energy. I like being around people. The solitude is good for a little while, But I like being around people, like getting lost, being in it, but not of it unless I choose, and being able to turn it on and off without having to be accountable for that. I think being someplace that's walkable. I think being traveling in a car, I mean, it kind of loses the connectedness to the earth to me. I like the idea of being able to physically walk a city. I like the idea of being very comfortable getting, like I said earlier, getting lost in a city but wandering, not getting lost, but wandering and having the freedom to wander and not having any constraints of doing that wandering without the constraints of time, having to be somewhere. Because if I want to linger here, I can. And I choose when to go, how long to stay, how long to be. And I distinctly remember thinking I could never have spent this much time doing this if other people were around because they think it was silly or indulgent or whatever. But it's what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was important, and it was enough.
The joy of being able to walk in a city is just something. I think that's what does it for a lot of people for just traveling, is just getting that experience of walking wherever they're going when they're traveling to another city. It really is such a thing.
Oh, yeah. I remember walking in Paris. My daughter was with me there. She started crying because she was, Mommy, how long? I was so excited about walking, and I had on comfortable shoes. She was trying to be cute. I'm like, baby, we're in Paris. Don't worry about it. Do you see all these boutiques? Don't worry about it. Just be comfortable. But walking absolutely does that. And it was interesting because a friend of ours made reservations at a particular restaurant, and I didn't even know the name of it, but we were walking down the street and we saw this restaurant. And we were like, oh, wow, that's a cool place. Look at that. And, and like, yeah, we walked on to our hotel. It turned out that was the restaurant. And that someone had made reservations for us at. And it was the synchronicity of things that happen. And, getting hungry on the street and just having some cheese and bread and candy. It was great.
It is such an enriching thing to be able to go somewhere. But as you've already illustrated, you don't have to go far. You can go.
You can go to a rural and rural Arnoldville, which, by the way, the NEA has recognized as one of those exceptional cities that has really taken advantage of creative placemaking. George Marks at New News has done a tremendous job in engaging the entire community to embrace their French heritage and also to encourage cross-cultural communication, integration, folk art, other art, international cultural exchange. You can go to this tiny city, small rural city, have a wonderful dinner at a local restaurant by master chefs, stay in a tiny house, go in and listen to fiddlers or Cajun music, have a conversation with people in French, and just sit in a gallery and just talk to people, like walking into their living room. And those are the kinds of escapes that are within, an hour from here. Yeah. It's wonderful.
That's sort of a good call for everybody who's listening, wherever you are in the world. You can explore, almost be like a tourist in your own area, or be a tourist in your own surrounding communities.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's it's like that all over the country and all over the world. There are different people and different experiences, travel experiences you can have just by opening the door and having conversations in places that are different from the place where you reside, with people who are different than you, who think differently, who play differently, who music is different from yours, that you can really learn to. It might not be your cup of tea, but you can experience and just see the world through somebody else's eyes. And it's a wonderful thing.
I want to go back a tiny bit.
Okay.
You mentioned journaling. Can you tell us about the experience of journaling and what that means to you?
Journaling, first, full disclosure, I'm on a number of behavioral health boards in the city, Mental Health Association of Greater Baton Rouge and Capital Area Human Services, and two wonderful organizations that support people who are having behavioral health issues. But everybody's somewhere on that spectrum, really. Sometimes we need therapy, sometimes we don't, but to journal so you can reflect on where you are emotionally, how you are interacting with your environment, to be able to determine what's important for you to experience, to see. And if you journal every day or intermittently, and to go back for 3 years and see what was important to you then, much like the question you asked me earlier, now, what did that mean to me over a course of time? To be able to go back and to see how you've grown and to see where you're stagnant and to see what kind of experiences you're missing so you can have those. And to see, and reaffirm what's important to you. I think journaling is just one of those vehicles to discover ourselves. I don't think that they're necessarily, in my case, they're nothing that's I want to publish or anything. I remember writing some, I'm telling on myself, wrote journals all through high school and college. Oh. And then when my little boys, it was okay. But when I had a little girl, I said, you know what? Maybe it's time to burn these. But I think journaling and writing about your experiences so that you recall them, so you don't lose those stories is real important. We have other ways to journal through pictures. We're becoming very visual now, and we have different tools to journal or to do in addition. I like writing. I like the feel of writing on good paper with a good pen. I just like that experience. But taking great photographs that can stimulate memory are wonderful too. But it's so much bigger when you can write it and read it and recall it that way, because you have so much when you look at a picture, but when you're writing it and your memories, all of your senses can be released that way because it's limited by what's in front of you. So you have to imagine it and you have to recall it.
For me, I know that to me it feels different, the hand to pen to paper.
Yes.
There's something different in the whole process for me than if I were to type my notes or anything like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's just not the same. It's not good. Not good.
Of course, we say do whatever works for you, but we know.
yeah, write it. Get a good journal, and the quality of the paper makes a difference. I worked very closely with the graphic designer, wonderful designer, Denise Reno. And I was like, okay, graphic design, I don't know, yeah, okay. But she taught me just about elements of design. I remember we were working on a project and she was explaining different kinds of paper and different textures and what they do, what was appropriate and all that. And then I started to think, even though I didn't know that, when I would go and look for a journal, it's like fabrics when you're looking for a dress, I would instinctively feel the pages and just touch. And I wasn't conscious of it until she explained, the different kinds of paper and blah, 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 blah. And I said, oh, well, I know all that. But I know what I like and I know what feels good. That's another thing. And I'm jumping subjects.
Yes, sir.
But travel sort of, and I've heard other people say this, but it sort of releases your intuition or gets you to rely on your intuition. And that may be something as simple as, don't go there, like a safety thing. But I think more so it allows you to be drawn I think we're all here. We have all different paths and that kind of thing. But I think when you're able to trust that intuition and you're wandering, you're drawn to what feeds your soul. I mean, you're drawn to objects, you're drawn to architecture, you're drawn to conversations, you know where you're comfortable. And being able to be in a situation where you can just sort of use your intuition to guide you, then helps you when you have to re-engage with the real world and work and all of that, to remind you that your intuition is a very powerful tool to help guide you on your path, whatever it is and wherever it's taking you.
Tell me if this works for you, this metaphor, but it's like you've opened the door to that.
Yes. And traveling helps keep that door open so you can trust yourself.
Yeah. And bring that open door back into your real life, your regular life.
Absolutely. I cannot leave this without saying how very special Astrid is. We met when I'm not going to tell the Pearl story, but we met when I was working at the local arts council, arts and education coordinator, and she was working with the junior league and the arts programs, and we worked together, and we could not get on the phone or get together because we would just talk, and we fixed everybody's problems and all that kind of stuff, but we just clicked, and I knew then that she was just a beautiful, beautiful person. I was so excited when she decided, well, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to go travel the world. I don't know what I'm going to do. And now here she is creating a clothing line for traveling. And I told her, she needs a larger model. Here I am. But just to see her have this vision and follow her path and not know where it was going to lead her. I went to the launch when she did the website and all that in New Orleans. It was a wonderful thing, but she didn't know where she was ultimately going to go with this.
Podcasting
and all that. Because, and I think if you know Astrid from years, I understand. I think she's at a class right now learning how to use some technology. Good luck with that. But I remember when she started, a smartphone presented a challenge, and now she's like, whoa,
doing everything
and so exquisitely, and following her travel on Facebook and on her webpage and listening to her. I'm just so very proud of this very strong, courageous woman who decided to follow her passion. And I think she's going to be a torch for others to take care of themselves, to travel, to explore. It may not even be travel. They may be doing some other kind of exploration, but having the courage to step out there and do it. I appreciate you, Astrid, and I can't wait to see where you're going to go next.
Thank you so much, Gerri, for being on the show. I know that your perspective is really going to be so interesting and really helpful to people. I thank you for sharing it today.
Well, thank you, Catherine. Invite me back anytime. It was a pleasure.
Excellent. We thank Gerri Hobdy for being on Solo Travel Talk. We hope you've enjoyed hearing her perspective. Solo Travel Talk is the podcast of Astrid Solo Travel Advisor. Visit astridtravel.com for this show, Astrid's latest blog posts, links to all her social media, and her world-famous packing list. You can get your own copy of Astrid's complimentary packing list, and we suggest that you do. Just go to the page there, astridtravel.com. There's an easy place to download it. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and really any of the finer places that podcasts can be found. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you again to Gerri, and we'll see you next week on Solo Travel Talk.
Thank you for listening to Solo Travel Talk. Follow Astrid on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. To learn more about Astrid or Solo Travel Advisors, visit her website, astridtravel.com.